Here in this lecture video, we're now going to look at Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Again, an orthodox school of Indian philosophy, meaning they accept the authority of the Vedas. So let's look at an overview then of the Yoga school of philosophy. First, the word yoga derives from the Sanskrit root yuj, which means to bind, yoke, join, or unite. It typically refers to any kind of disciplined practice, but specifically here within this philosophical school, what is understood by yoga means concentration or specifically disciplined meditation. So not something free, but it's something carefully studied, carefully attuned to, carefully habituated over time, right? Such that one then does something with purpose. And so the soteriology of the yoga school, meaning their theory of liberation, is similar to the Samkhya school. So like Samkhya, yoga holds that liberation is brought about by discerning the duality between consciousness, purusha, and materiality, prakriti. But there's a difference, a very important difference. Whereas Samkhya is more rationalistic in that the key is in a right understanding, so it's in the mind alone. Yoga argues that this is actually done by following practices of yoga. So there's an emphasis on practice. So their argument is that through disciplined practice, one works to cease all mental functions. That unlike Samkhya, which wants to realize correct mental functions, to realize the true nature of the world and of being, yoga wants one to cease regular mental functions, which only occurs through disciplined practice. Having then attained concentration without content through this disciplined practice, right, by ceasing mental functions, then one will end up isolating consciousness from the material world, thus liberating it. Now, their argument is that disciplined meditation involves the cessation of the functioning of ordinary awareness. The 5 functions of ordinary awareness are correct awareness. So if I see something in front of me like a book, and it really is a book, I have correct awareness of it being a book. Error, where I might be trying to correctly perceive something, but I go wrong in some way. I think it's a book, but really it's like a DVD case. Verbal construction, so the use of language, which typically, we're kind of putting labels on things. Sleep, so of course I have some kind of an awareness when I sleep. Maybe I dream things. And memory, so a certain kind of retention of previous experience. So disciplined meditation wants to stop those things from occurring because they influence how being actually is. So as Patanjali says, then, that is when the functioning of ordinary awareness has ceased. So then when ordinary awareness has ceased, there is the condition of the seer, that is, of purusha, consciousness, as it is in itself. That is, without any content, or in other words, pure contentless consciousness. What would that be like? Pure contentless consciousness. So pure consciousness, which usually when we talk about being conscious, it's always of something, right? Famously, the idea of that to be conscious of something is like, to say that something is consciousness is to say that it is aware in some way of an object. So there is a seer and a thing seen. And yet, the yoga school here through Patanjali is arguing that there can be this pure contentless consciousness where there is no object to be seen. One is just purely being conscious of consciousness. That is the goal through disciplined meditation. Now, there can also be content-filled concentration that achieves the same thing, but this, importantly, is only done through focusing on God as the object of meditation. And if we remember, God, Brahman, is the same as Atman. And so in this way, one is focusing on oneself. Not oneself in a material sense, but oneself as a manifestation of Brahman, of God. So again, Patanjali says, then, when concentration has been properly cultivated, there is a going over into one's pure consciousness and the disappearance of the obstacles as well. Now, there are practical benefits then to this pure contentless consciousness, this kind of experience. And peace of mind is the benefit. So when we have disciplined meditation, we achieve a kind of stability of awareness where we're no longer influenced by certain distractions like illness, dullness, doubt, laziness, restlessness, frustration, or depression. Instead, we are clear of these things. Now, there are, of course, practices that achieve this result. So what are the practices? So Patanjali says, peace of mind, or stability of awareness, arises from the practice of friendliness toward those who are happy, compassion toward those who are in pain, joy toward those who are meritorious, and dispassion toward those who are behaving in a non-meritorious manner. Or, stability of awareness, that is, the overcoming of the distractions, can be accomplished through the retention and exhalation of breath. So, through focusing on one's breath, one's breathing patterns. Oftentimes, this is what one advocates to do when beginning a mindfulness meditation, for example. Or, this can be achieved, peace of mind, when there is the apprehension of certain kinds of contents. Stability of the mind can become possible. Or, again, stability of the mind can become possible when the functioning of awareness is free from grief and is brilliantly clear. Or it can occur when the contents of awareness are free from attachment. So maybe, for example, one got a bad grade on a test, and it's really affecting one's mood and how one thinks about their day, right? One is attached then to that specific feeling, to that experience. If they work through this disciplined practice of maybe focusing on breathing, one can free their mind's attachment to certain feelings which cause suffering, for example. Through that non-attachment of those feelings or desires, one is able to have peace of mind. This can also occur through focusing on the contents of knowledge that derive from sleep or dreaming. And this can occur through reflective meditation on any pleasing object. So the complete control achieved by the yogin, who has attained stability of mind, extends from the smallest particle of reality to the largest entity. So the structured practice of disciplined meditation involves ascetic exercises for the body. So certain rituals that involve things with your body, not just what you think, but what you do. It also involves sacred study or recitation for speech and voice. So this could involve study and recitation of the Vedas, for example. And focusing on God as the content of meditation for the mind, on how it is that all is Brahman. The 5 afflictions then that should be overcome with yoga, with this disciplined practice, are ignorance, so being unaware of the way in which materiality is different from consciousness; egoity, so the idea that I need to care about really myself as someone distinct from other people, and instead recognize that we are all one, all Brahman; attachment, so it being attached to things, whether they be desires or goals or feelings; hatred, so obviously hating for certain objects or people, of course; and clinging to ordinary life, clinging to certain ways in which we think that we must act, and we realize we don't have to act in certain ways. That really ordinary life is convention. Convention can always be overturned because it is just simply convention. So finally, right, as again the goal for the yoga school is liberation, spiritual liberation, liberation of consciousness from materiality. They argue that the manifest world, so the external material world, prakriti, exists for the sake of pure seeing. So common seeing ends up separating the seer from the object seen. It ends up separating consciousness from what one is conscious of. This ends up being caused by ignorance, where one then comes to associate themselves, their conscious self, with their material self, their physical body. through disciplined meditation, through whether those breathing rituals, meditation, right, or whatever else, one hopefully begins to see that they are not their material self. And they try to achieve this pure, contentless, conscious state. So as Patanjali says, when ignorance is absent, there is absence of contact between prakriti, materiality, and purusha, so again, consciousness, which means abandonment, or, in other words, the realization of spiritual liberation of the seer from the seen.